in and around the 7th of February. So Orlando is you can take over and continue.
Pleasant good morning, everybody. To the viewers online, the media who is present here in the room. As Dr. Crawford mentioned, the celebrations is going to be an extended celebration. It officially starts on the 19th of October, which will be the launch of our Independence celebration. Again, the 19th of October, the launch of our Independence celebration. And it will span the entire 2024, ending in February 2025. We have planned out, done a lot of planning in terms of how we want the composition of the celebration to flow. And it's broken up into two major phases. The first phase is the pre-independence phase. And within that phase, we have planned out 21 national events. Those are events that will be executed by the state. And we also have events that we will endorse from the private sector. There are a lot of persons who have reached out to the Secretariat wanting to do events around independence, and we are evaluating those events, and we will then endorse some of these events as additional events for the public to participate in. The official pre-independence celebrations will start in October 19th and will end on February 9th, 2024. All right, we've also curated a special list of events from January 28th, 2024 to February 9th, 2024, that would allow not just Grenadians, but persons in the diaspora to ensure that they can come back and participate in that block of events. So it's going to be about 10 days of intense events and activities and celebrations that the diaspora will be able to participate in. And any foreign person who wants to come in to participate in our independence can do so. We will make that full list of events available so persons can begin their pre-planning and booking for the event. We expect to see a lot of persons on island, and we expect for it to be events that are well attended and well executed. The events will span from sporting events to festive events to cultural events to academic/conference type events. We have a plethora of different activities to ensure that we cover all aspects of our 50 years of independence, our history, our people, and absolutely our future. The post-independence celebrations will start on March 2024 and will end in January 2025. Those events are designed for what we call parish celebrations. So every parish would have their independent celebrations, each following a specific theme and guideline. And essentially, each parish will have a month where they have designated as their parish celebration month. In addition to the events, we also will see the installation of several sites of memories across the island, which is quite important for us to really document and iconize our history and our people. So you will see the installation of monuments and statues, the renaming of streets, and several other activities that will really help define Grenada in this modern time. As I mentioned, the launch will be on the 19th, and of course, all persons are invited to this launch. It's going to be a spectacle. It's going to be an event that persons, I don't think you would want to miss. More information will follow in the coming days. We will be launching our website, which will provide a lot of information about that. The website URL will be GrenadaTurns50.gd. And also the email address for the Secretariat is also info@GrenadaTurns50.gd. So persons can reach out to us. The Secretariat will be fully staffed, and I would allow Ms. Gail Purcell to speak a little bit about the composition and the operations of the Secretariat.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Under the leadership of Dr. Wendy Crawford as our chairperson, I will be heading up the Secretariat for the 50th anniversary of independence celebrations. We have established, at this point, we're still operating slightly virtual, but we have established a location for our Secretariat on the Carenage. We'll be housed in the former building that, the building that formerly housed the tropical shipping on the Carenage. And once we have moved in, we're in the process of preparing the space to move in, and we will be a fully staffed, as Mr. Romain indicated. the Secretariat is intended to be the center of the celebrations, the nerve center, I guess you can call it, where all things independence will go through. That Secretariat, the execution will be leading on the execution of the events in collaboration with the various subcommittees. Each of the events has an organizing body. The Secretariat is there to ensure that the flow of the organization and the implementation of the events happen smoothly. Mr. Romain would have made mention that we are in the process of launching our website, which will be up in the coming days. In the interim, we know that there are a number of people who want to have communication, have dialogue, and be in touch with someone with reference to the organization of activities. They can reach out to us by email currently. The email address, I think it was mentioned, but I will repeat it, is info@grenadaturns50.gd. In time, we will be a fully staffed operation to be able to respond to the public's needs. And on launch, I think you will learn greater details in terms of some of the activities we also envision for the operation of the Secretariat. Yeah.
Just one more point. So for the launch on the 19th, again, as I mentioned, it's going to be a spectacle. We have several installations planned for the Carnage. It's going to be on the Carnage. And we'll use this event to officially unveil the Independence theme, the Independence theme song, and the Independence logo, together with the full list of events for the remaining celebration period. So again, the 19th of October, make it a date, don't be late.
Thank you so much to the National Organizing Committee. And of course, we heard from Dr. Wendy Crawford. She's the chairperson of the National Organizing Committee for the 50th anniversary celebrations. And Mr. Orlando Romain and Ms. Gail Purslow. She will be setting up the Secretariat. So we look forward to hearing more. And I know some of you have burning questions. We're going to take those questions at the end of all the presentations. All right. At this time, joining us to the head table is our Minister for Legal Affairs, Labor, Consumer Affairs, and the Attorney General, Senator Claudette Joseph, and she will be presenting on wages.
Thank you, Madam Press Secretary. Good morning, Prime Minister, other persons of the Celebrations Committee, the Independence Celebrations Committee here, and especially our friends in the media, members of the media. It is my pleasure to be able to report to you on the progress of the work of the Wages Advisory Committee. As you know, the Wages Advisory Committee is set up by law, the Employment Act, and is mandated to have a review of the minimum wages in the country every 3 years. And in keeping with that requirement, and being conscious of the fact that the last time a Wages Advisory Committee was constituted to review the minimum wages was in 2011. One of the things we set about doing early is setting up the Wages Advisory Committee. That committee was constituted on September 1st of 2022 and has, since its constitution, traversed the entire length and breadth of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique, consulting with all relevant stakeholders, the general public, employers, and specific sectors of employers and employees, with a view to revising the minimum wage in Grenada upward. And the committee served its report, which was considered by the cabinet in August. in August. And with the agreement of Cabinet, the committee has embarked on a second round of consultations, having made its recommendations to Cabinet with the intent that these recommendations will be passed into law to come into effect on 1st January 2024. So what we have, some of the highlights coming out of the final report, which deviated from the current minimum wage structure, include equalizing, a recommendation to equalize the minimum wage across gender. As most of us will know, we have a disparity right now between male and female workers in certain sectors, particularly the agriculture sector. And that the recommendation should be a thing of the past as we move towards greater equality among our workers across gender. The other change would be inclusion in the categories of workers covered by the minimum wages order of certain sectors not previously included. And these include the call centers, people in the call center sector, certain workers in the construction sector that were left out previously, laborers and helpers, and also media workers. We also are going to be introducing in Grenada for the first time the concept of a baseline minimum wage, which would capture persons and categories of workers not specifically mentioned in the order. And that is the subject of the second round of consultation now ongoing. The recommendation of the committee is $60 per day wage across the board, so that in any given sector, the minimum wage should not be less than $60 a day. So the usual categories of workers are covered: machine operators, cutters, mechanics, cleaners, clerical workers, security guards, domestic workers, caregivers, and that includes persons in early childhood care, workers in bakeries, agricultural workers, construction workers, all categories of construction workers, transportation, the hospitality sectors, utility workers, now call centers, and so on, media workers. So this is where we are. We are now, the consultations are ongoing and they are taking place with the stakeholders, specific stakeholders. And so that is why perhaps you would not hear public consultations announced just yet. So entities such as the GIDC, the Hotel and Tourism Association, the call center operators, the construction company, the bus associations, public sector, senior managers, the Ministry of Agriculture, considering that they have a big chunk of workers, agricultural workers covered by the order, manufacturers, bakery associations, security companies, civil society organizations, media workers. So these are the entities who are now being engaged on a one-on-one in this round of consultation. And we aim, just as soon as the budget consultations that are now taking place, as soon as they're over, we're going to have at least one major public consultation where the recommendations of the advisory committee will be put to the public for questions and scrutiny. So we want to ensure that the entire nation is with us when this new minimum wages order comes into effect, especially employers who are going to be affected, and employers, and and employees. We want to make sure the economic impact is positive and that we collectively lift our people above what is now considered the poverty line. Minimum wages in many instances fall below the poverty line. So we essentially have people working to remain in poverty. And this change we want to make once we bring the new order into force in 2024.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator Claudette Joseph, Minister with responsibility for legal affairs, labor, and consumer affairs. And this time we want to invite to make presentations on the Kawana Bay settlement, Crown lands, and national security, Honorable Prime Minister Deacon Mitchell.
Thank you very much, Neela, and pleasant morning to members of the media who are here with us in person, as well as those who are online, and a special good morning to the citizens of Petite Martinique, Carriacou, and Grenada joining us for this press briefing. I want to speak a little about our independence celebration though before we get into the three main items, and I want to highlight that the launch of the independence celebrations on the 50th anniversary independence celebrations on the 19th of October is no accident. The 19th of October, as we all know, is a significant, if not tragic, date in Grenada's history, particularly over the last 40 years. And so the cabinet will take the decision, and we will give instructions that the necessary legal work is done to declare the 19th of October a national holiday. And the intent is to make that national holiday a permanent holiday. The tragic events of October 19th are events that we need to commemorate, that we need to reflect on, and that we need to make sure that we learn the sober lessons. Many of our brothers and sisters, a sitting prime minister and significant members of his cabinet, as you know, were tragically killed on that day. And as we begin to turn into our 50th anniversary of our nation's infancy, as Dr. Crawford indicated, it is important that we remember this event to ensure that we learn the lessons and that we do not, in fact, ever get to a point where this is ever repeated in the history of Grenada. As part of the 50th anniversary celebrations as well, covering the entire year, the government intends to embark upon, with public support and consultation, the naming of our first national heroes as part of our 50th anniversary celebrations. And so we certainly will have names proposed, and we would invite feedback from the public. We are hoping that we can name a minimum of 3 and perhaps no more than 5 national heroes, because obviously being recognized as a national hero is the highest award or honor that any nation can bestow upon its citizens. And so we are looking forward to that happening. We also anticipate, and at a further briefing we will indicate once we are able to successfully do so, we also anticipate being able to acquire lands that we can dedicate to creating a national heroes park, where those persons who are in fact named as national heroes, where some bus or other memorabilia of them can be erected at the national park. And this is a venture that we are quite excited about. We hope that by the time we get to the official launch of our 50th anniversary celebrations commencement, that we would be in a position to provide further details to members of the public on this initiative. So that is something that we certainly look forward to, and we would say stay tuned for further details on this. If I could perhaps, since we're talking about the national park, speak to the issue of the government's policy on Crown lands. And in this case, we are speaking here to strategic Crown lands, particularly in the south of the island, that to a large extent drives our tourism product. And we can start with sites starting from the Point Salines, coming up to the Grandance beach area. Our government has taken the policy decision, and we are going to reiterate this by bringing the necessary legislation to Parliament to support this, that any lands which are owned by the state of Grenada and which have not yet been sold as freehold will only be transferred via leasehold. So I'm going to repeat: any lands which have not yet been transferred as freehold and which still remains in the hands of the state of Grenada in these strategic locations will only be transferred by way of leasehold. And so that includes the vast majority of Grandlands Beach by way of example. And the government has taken steps during the last several months to ensure that that happens. And I will give two examples. The single largest acreage on Grandlands Beach is the site that houses the Radisson Hotel. That site has always been leasehold until former administrations made the decision to in fact transfer what we call the reversion to the lease or the freehold to private individuals. I will not get into the rationale or reasons for why that was done. The long and short of it, though, is that this year we faced the unenviable situation that even the reversion to the freehold could have been further transferred to a private individual. What that meant is that the rents that the government once collected from having leased the site to the hotelier was in fact being paid to a private individual, and we were not collecting the rent. It also meant that we had no control over the site because we were not the landlord, and therefore we could not enforce the lease, nor could we speak to any future development of the site. And so the government took the decision to in fact repurchase the reversion from Time Book Holdings Limited. That transaction is scheduled to be closed on October 15th, and henceforth the government will become the landlord. It will once again begin resuming the rent collections, and it would put us as landlord in a position to in fact ensure that the lease is complied with, but I think more importantly, be able to ensure that we remain the development partner with the hotelier for the future development of the site. There is also a smaller piece of land located in Grandlands, which abuts the Koyaba Hotel and is located behind the Umbrella site. This land was also Krong land, which was transferred to the National Insurance Scheme in a land for debt scheme that took place many years ago, where the government transferred several lots of land to the National Insurance Scheme to satisfy debts that were unpaid by the government to the National Insurance Scheme. The National Insurance Scheme has in recent time taken a decision to in fact sell some of these lots of land so that it could become more liquid, and the Minister for Social Security has been keeping the public abreast of the several initiatives by the NIS to ensure the survivability of the NIS, and therefore liquidating some of these assets is part of this strategy for NIS. However, given the strategic location of this piece of land on Grandlands, the government also intervened to ensure that the land will be transferred via leasehold, and that the government will become the landlord, and so that the new tenant who is there will be treating with and partnering with the government. I come lastly to the Kawana Bay site. This site formerly housed the hotel known as Flamboyant Hotel, and subsequent to the closure of the Flamboyant Hotel was transferred by the government of Grenada, not via leasehold, which is what Flamboyant Hotel had, but via freehold to the development company True Blue Bay Development Limited, which is the company that created the Kawana Bay project and had an approved CBI status for that project. As the nation well knows, not too long ago, the former administration led by Dr. Mitchell and the developer Kawana Bay had a very public and unfortunate falling out. And this led to the developer taking the state of Grenada to arbitration before the International Court for the Settlement of Investment Disputes, known as, in short, ICSID, and sued the state of Grenada for several tens of millions of dollars. And the site became a white elephant. The construction ceased. The site was closed down and it has sat there for the last 2 years or more. Upon assuming office, the government took the decision that we could not simply allow perhaps what is one of the most spectacular sites on Grandlands Beach, and certainly the most spectacular view, to become a white elephant dominating the landscape at that end of Grandlands Beach, Monterey area. And so for a protracted period of time, the government, first led by a cabinet-approved committee, and I want to stop here and signal our gratitude to that committee. The committee was led by Mr. Richard Duncan, and it included Ms. Leslie Ann Sion, Mr. Hassan Hadid and Mr. Henry Joseph. They led the negotiations initially to try and see how this matter could be resolved. And I want to thank them for the time and effort that they put into this matter, because although it was not resolved under their watch, specifically, they certainly contributed significantly towards advancing the matter. In summary, the government made the decision to acquire the site so that we could, in fact, put ourselves in a position to have fresh negotiations with a new developer so that this project could, in fact, be completed successfully, so that construction could resume, so that several hundreds of Grenadians who were once working on the site and who became unemployed as a result of the construction site closing could look forward to resumption of work on the site, to resumption of employment, and ultimately to a hotel actually being completed on the site. So the government has acquired the site. It has acquired the site at a cost of $22 million US. We will be making the necessary payments between now and next year to the main owner of the site. The result of this is that the arbitration proceedings between the developer and the state of Grenada has come to an end. And we are happy to report that because the legal fees associated with defending the ICSID arbitration was running the people of Grenada into the several hundreds of thousands of US dollars, if not, it had already reached millions of US dollars in legal fees for a dispute that we felt was certainly not necessary and one that was created and should never have happened in the first place. Having acquired the site, the government is currently engaged in significant and advanced discussions with potential developers over their taking over the site to resume construction. At this stage, we have not yet concluded a definitive deal, but we feel quite optimistic that we would be in a position to come back shortly to announce the conclusion of this definitive deal. I will make this point though, the site will only be transferred via leasehold. It will not be transferred via freehold. And so we can expect that as this government continues, it will ensure that it protects the patrimony of Grenada. It will ensure that we put future generations of Grenadians in a position where if developers do not do what they commit to, that we're in a position to renegotiate with them, that we're in a position to get them to give up the lease without having to resort to court and litigation and arbitration. And I say this because there are clear examples where if the lands are transferred as freehold, the government has literally no leverage on any of these developers and they can simply sit on the site and speculate as they wish. And so we will not countenance this. If persons, whether local or if they are foreigners who are coming in to invest, wish to obtain strategic state assets, particularly in the tourism property development market, we must ensure that they commit and do the things they say they will do as we partner with them and as we support them. But if they don't, we need to put the nation in a position where they can easily regain control over the site. So as I said, we intend to back this policy decision up with the necessary legislation to support this. And so once we have concluded the ongoing negotiations and settled with a particular developer, we'll come back to brief the nation as to where we are with this. I want to move quickly to the issue of national security. Like many of our citizens and as Minister for National Security, I think we can well imagine my own consternation and significant concern over the state of gun-related homicides that we've had in Grenada. And I want to emphasize here that for the most part, crime in Grenada has been trending downwards, save for this issue of these gun-related homicides. In total, we have 18 homicides for the year, many of them gun-related. And as I've said repeatedly, firearms are lethal, they're meant to kill. And I dare say, perhaps in some of these instances where firearms not involved, some of the victims may very well have survived whatever altercation or issue they had with the perpetrators of the crime. And so we intend to take a very robust response to this. And the Cabinet intends to pilot legislation in Parliament to amend the Firearms Act to introduce far more significant penalties for persons found in unlawful possession of fire. We will have the ceremonial state opening of of Parliament next week, and we certainly intend to pilot the necessary legislation before we go on the Christmas break to be read in Parliament so that it could be enacted into law to signal our view that the possession of unlawful firearms, the use of unlawful firearms, the trading in unlawful firearms will not be something that we will tolerate or countenance. Second, as I indicated, the government through cabinet has appointed the formation of a National Security Advisory Council. We intend to have the council constituted. And the first order of business that it will be mandated to do is to carry out a series of national consultations, which we hope to commence in October, throughout the Tri-Island state with all of our stakeholders, looking at this question of national security, looking at how we can begin to implement the necessary policy and programs that treats with ensuring that as a nation, we do not view violence as a means of conducting ourselves or as a means of resolving our disputes or conflict. We intend to back this up by contracting with specialists in the area of behavioral science that could address particularly for young persons and particularly our young men, how we treat with mediating our differences and disputes amongst ourselves, amongst our family members, and amongst our villages. Because one of the clear things that is obvious about the acts of violence is that oftentimes the perpetrators and the victims know each other. Oftentimes they are either related or they're from the same villages or neighboring villages. And many times it escalates into acts of violence that may lead to maiming, injury, or worse, homicide. The government will also be constituting a project team to advise the government on the implementation of CCTV cameras throughout significant public areas and hotspots in Grenada. The government is already in possession of the CCTV cameras. We intend to obviously do the necessary feasibility studies to have them erected at many of the major urban centers and public gathering places where the public meets, from the market square, the main bus terminals, the areas that are heavily trafficked by the public, as well as other areas where we may be vulnerable, particularly in some of our coastal villages, where we believe we are vulnerable to firearm trafficking in particular. The administration as well intends to, from the budget cycle coming up, deliberately take the decision to invest more in ensuring that our Coast Guard is outfitted with the necessary resources to beef up its capacity to patrol our coastal areas, because we are certainly recognize that we do not produce firearms in Grenada, and they are clearly coming into Grenada from outside of Grenada. We will continue to work with our partners in the region and in North America in particular to address how we can stymie the flow of firearms into Grenada and into the region, because once they get into the region, then we too are vulnerable for the risk of it getting into Grenada. And in many instances, the firearms trade is tied with the narcotics trade. And it is also a significant challenge for us, because while we help many of our partners to stem the flow of narcotics to the north, we need to make sure that they're working assiduously with us to stem the flow of firearms to the south and into our respective countries. So I will conclude with my brief remarks on these areas. Madam Press Secretary, it's over to you. I am sure members of the media are quite eager to engage with the Independence Celebrations committee team members who are here, as well as the Attorney General and myself, for any questions that they may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Deacon Mitchell, for your presentation on national security and Crown Bay settlement, and of course the Crown lands. And at this time, I'd like to ask members of the media who may have questions to post them now. I know Ms. Faria, you had a question. You can go right ahead.
Good morning, Callistra Faria, The Narrative. First, I want to say that as an executive member of the Media Workers Association, I am extremely concerned with the format of this news conference. You had 3 news conferences in one, ask media people to wait and then to ask questions on 3 separate sets of things. If a better management style is brought to these events, it would serve us, the media. If this is a news conference and it's intended for us, it would serve us much better if our needs are taken into consideration. We are also busy people. So, the October 19, day of celebration, 50 years, it's exciting, but it's also a tragic day. The Prime Minister talked about that. Why have we chosen October 19, which is a somber, sad, tragic day for us to launch a period of celebration? Can somebody explain the thinking behind that for me?
Okay, if I should, first of all, we have a history that our people need to be aware of. Independence, 50 years of independence, very historic. And we think that since the objective is to tell our story, write our narratives, embrace the good, the bad, the ugly, and because this is our story and we need to tell it. And since the objective of independence is self-determination and creating our identity and understanding our values, our norms, our culture, our history, we have to get to the point where we are not running away from a major event in our history. And since independence is such a historic event for us, a period when we are given a chance to tell our history, what better time could we ask for when the nation will be attentive to not only the celebration of our independence, our period of self-determination, or a period when we have to redefine and tell our story. And October 19 is a story that everybody have told, except have written about, have spoken about, have established the narrative, and all of that came externally. So in the essence of independence and self-determination, we think this is a very good opportunity to tell our story ourselves. And so there is no better fitting moment, I think, when the entire nation is attentive to that period between October 19th and the 25th, that it signifies, it should signify for us that level of independence and self-determination, that here is our story. We are ready to embrace it. It may not be the prettiest or kindest of stories, but we have to at some point, and I think this is a time when we should do it.
If I may also respond to this, and I want to mark the 19th is merely the launch of the commencement of the activities to commemorate the 50th anniversary. And I'm using the word commemorate here because I think too often people assume public holiday means a festive or celebratory event. In fact, and I think that's the point I wish to make here, our perspective of marking the 19th of October as a public holiday is in fact for us to recognize this somber nature, the tragic nature of what happened, and for us to reflect upon it and to understand why it happened, and to ensure that we learn the lessons to make sure that it does not happen. And I'm making this profound point because I talked about the issue of violence in our society and how we get to resolve our conflicts and our disputes, including political disputes, which is why our values of democracy, freedom, the right to vote, etc. matters. Because if we walk away from that, then it means when you're unhappy with the government or when you have internal feuding, you will resolve it precisely the way it was resolved on the 19th of October. And so it is important for us to mark that occasion in a somber manner, in a reflective manner, and perhaps even an emotional manner, so that we understand when we say, for example, that we are a democratic society, that we value democracy, that we value freedom of speech, freedom of thought, that those things actually mean something, because the opposite of it is what would have happened on the 19th of October in a very tragic manner. And so our 50th anniversary celebrations includes part of that history, which effectively is 40 years old as of this year. And so we we need to recognize that when we are celebrating our 50th anniversary of independence, that there are significant dates within a calendar year. 7th of February, the 19th of October, the 25th of October, the 13th of March. That means something to us as a people, certainly over the last 50 years. All of those dates that I've called are post from our independence date of 7th February, the 13th of March, the 19th of October, the 25th of October. They're all dates that are post our period of independence, not pre. And therefore, it is important for us to not run away from that reality, not bear it, so that we can learn the proper lessons and so that we can teach the next generation of Grenadians what has happened over the last 50 years. And that includes, tragically, the events of October 19th.
Just to be clear, Prime Minister, we are launching a celebration of our 50th anniversary on a day of travel and on a day when we're recognizing a tragic event. We're doing both things. That's what we're doing, yeah?
Yes.
Okay.
Good morning,
Good
Beverly
morning.
Beverly Telesford, GBN. Since we're on the topic of our 50th anniversary and October 19th, since our 50th anniversary of independence will be launched on October 19th, are there any plans or talks or so to provide some form of compensation to the victims of both the events of October 19, 1983 and June 19, 1980?
Sorry, I didn't get the second date.
June 19.
At this stage, the answer would be no, as in there has been no deliberate thought on the specific issue of compensation. But I would certainly say, as part of the discussion about all of those issues, I think those are some of the issues that as a country we certainly would have to grapple with and discuss. But at this point in time, there is no specific government initiative to do so.
Thank you for your question.
Sorry, if I may, Ms. Telesford, I'm not sure if you are aware, but in 1985, between 85 and 87 thereabouts, there was in fact set up by the government a claims commission, which gave compensation to people affected by the events of October 19th to the 25th. So there was some substantial compensation already offered by the state and paid. I know that some people fell through the cracks, perhaps because it was set up so soon after those traumatic events. So some people didn't come forward. So that's an issue that came up since the period when the Truth and Reconciliation Commission was doing its work. But it's not that there was never compensation given, or the state never attended to the issue. As to June 19th, I don't think the Claims Commission covered the period prior to October 83.
Okay, so just to be clear, they can still come forward no today.
No, the Claims Commission is now defunct. Yes.
Thank you. Beverly, you have another question? You can go right ahead.
Okay, so my other question is also for clarity on the Kawana Bay developers. Can you just tell us why they would be allowed to keep their passports?
All right, so when you say they, you probably need to clarify. So the site has been acquired from the main developer. The individual persons who invested in the development, which is the CBI development, would be persons who, as part of their investment in the development, would have acquired Grenadian citizenship. And so by virtue of that, the mere fact that the government has acquired the site doesn't deprive them in any way, shape, or form of their citizenship. If, for instance, you were someone was born in Grenada and you has a Grenadian passport and there was land that the government needed for public purpose, the government could acquire the land and pay you compensation. It wouldn't in any way, shape, or form impact your rights as a citizen of the country. So the acquisition of the site has nothing to do with the individual investors' citizenship in Grenada.
Thank you. We'd like to take some additional questions if we have any online at this point.
Can you say it again?
All right, we do have a question from Nancy McGuire. Nancy, you may go right ahead with your question.
Good morning, everybody. On the national heroes, I think you said between 3 and 5 national heroes. Well, would that include people that have already passed?
Yes, at this point, there is no, it's more likely that it may include people who have passed rather than people who are living. But we have not, as at this point in time, settled upon the names that we may wish to ask the public to consider.
So how are you getting these names?
As the Independence chairperson would have said, I'm not sure if you missed it, we indicated that there were several committees.
Yes.
That includes the historic committee. So they have been doing significant work researching and highlighting the contributions of various Grenadians. Obviously, as part of any award system, there would obviously have to be a criteria that is looked at, discussed, agreed upon, and perhaps even legislated. Because you will have to set up the necessary legal and policy framework that creates the concept of a national hero, that tells you what's the criteria for it, that tells you how it is to be awarded or conferred upon someone, and what, if any, would be the benefits that that person or the estate may benefit from having such a title. So obviously, as part of an entire policy, that would be rolled out.
Right. Dr. Crawford, do you want to respond as well?
Yes, there is a historic heritage and documentation subcommittee coming out of the National Organizing Committee. They have, in fact, done the research and prepared submission for consideration of a criterion for establishing who should be considered national heroes. They have also made some recommendations of names going as far back as our indigenous period. And so that is in the process. Of course, it will be followed up by consultation with the broader public for recommendations or consideration of those that's recommended. But the composition of that committee, we basically have noted historians and persons interested in heritage: Angus Martin, Gloria Payne, Oliver Benoit, social scientist, Nicole Phillip, historian. So they have been doing extensive research on the history, and they have in fact prepared narratives on each of the recommended the persons that they have recommended as national heroes. Decisions have not yet been made, and that have to come after consultations, and so, and I guess it will be released by then.
Thank you so much, Dr. Crawford. I think we have one more question. We have.
May I ask? Oh, okay.
We have a question from Kendra. You can go ahead. Nancy, you have one more question, Nancy?
Yes, I did. I just wanted to ask a question about, I think it was Orlando had mentioned renaming streets. I'm just wondering how that is happening. Like, because you think about the name of the street would reflect part of the history. So are we going to be just taking these names out, or how are we going to do that? Thank you.
That committee I spoke about, the Historic Documentation and Heritage Subcommittee, they have also done the research, and they have made a number of recommendations of basically reclaiming our heritage, reclaiming our culture. And so they have made a number of recommendations for sites and places, and so that should be renamed. They have also made the recommendation, and like that of the heroes, it has to be brought for consultation to the more general public. So they have already completed the research and done that work, and have compiled their recommendation and submitted their proposal to the National Committee. So we have to take it from there in consultation with the various parishes and other, at least so that others will have an input and can contribute to making that decision. So the work is done for both the national heroes recommendations and the identification of sites and places that should be renamed, and the suggested names. So the focus is on Grenada, Grenada history, important people and events in the Grenada history, and that is the focus of the committee's work. How do we reclaim our heritage? How do we reclaim our and chart our identity as we go forward? So it's really looking inwards, taking care of our business and ensuring that this is really the extension of the work to establish who we are as a people.
Thank you, and thank you, Nancy, for your questions. We'll take some more questions. We do have a question here, Calistri, if you go ahead, and we will take other questions.
Thank you. Well, another question besides the one I was going to ask just came up because of what you said. Our culture, our heritage. What is our culture and our heritage? Are we saying that we're now going to be documenting and celebrating everything for the last 50 years? This is a new culture and heritage of us as an independent people, because when we talk about renaming streets, and so some of the street names and the monument sites and so on are named after people who have participated in and have been. It may not be pretty, but it's part of our heritage.
Yes.
The heritage part and then the culture part. And as far as I'm concerned, we are a multiracial society. So I'm a bit confused as to exactly what we're trying to do here. Can you explain it for me?
Sorry, I'm going to start with an example. Fort George, built during our colonial past, built by the sweat, blood, and tears of enslaved people. If we are saying we're celebrating our independence, if we're saying we're working towards self-determination, wouldn't it be more feasible? Wouldn't it spell better for our children to understand if we think of maybe someone in our past or somebody who would have contributed national significance to rename Fort George? It does not get rid of the history, but it causes us to focus. It causes our children, our students to focus more on our development, Grenada's future, developing our country.
If I may also state, we're not looking to rename everything. What we're doing is embarking on an exercise to objectively look at our history over the past couple of years, 50 years and pre, and to see where have we missed opportunities to define, as Dr. Crawford said, our identity, and to incorporate that into some of our architecture, our buildings, our streets, our monuments, so that it reflects not just a pre-colonialization period, but also post-colonization, post-independence period, to make sure that the heroes who would have done significant things during that period of people are also reflected in our history, and that they can have probably claim in key assets via naming conventions. So it's not an exercise to remove all the names of previous persons or previous sites, but to have an objective introspection and to ensure that it reflects all of our history and all of our people.
Thank you. One more question.
You would indulge me, please. On the Kimpton Kawana Bay issue, the follow-up to what Ms. Telesford asked about the passports, I'm confused there again with your response, Prime Minister. The investors, the smaller investors, not the developers, the investors who got passports in exchange for the investments that they made under the Citizenship by Investment program, are they exiting? Are they being compensated and exiting the project as well? Are we getting this project totally and fully without any of the previous, the developer, the investors, everybody's out?
Yes, the simple answer is yes. When you acquire the property, you're acquiring the interest of anyone who has a property interest, and that would have included any of the investors who would have been granted a condominium interest in the property.
So they are being reimbursed the money they paid for the passport.
It doesn't work that way.
So explain it to me, please.
It's a property acquisition. Whatever money you made from an investment point of view is a risk that someone takes. if you, as a result of your investment, that's a matter between you and the developer. As a result of your investment, the developer would have contracted and would have deeded you a condominium interest or a unit interest in the property. Then the acquisition would have acquired that. That's a property interest. And if any compensation is to be paid, it would be in relation to the property interest. But just like any other investment, if you take an investment, let's put it this way: whether or not the government acquired the property, anyone who had up to our acquisition invested in that property, what would they have had? An interest in a abandoned, closed down site. We can do an assessment of whether that's an investment or a loss. But essentially, what we've acquired as a property, and anyone who has an interest in the property would have an opportunity to present any claims for evaluation of their interest in the property and to be compensated accordingly.
So some people may decide, we're going to keep the investment, we're staying in, that's fine too, and they continue to be.
No, I'm saying they can't decide whether they keep the investment. I'm saying the government has acquired the site. As a matter of law, we have that right. And having acquired the site, I'm saying what they have is a right to be compensated for whatever interest they might have had in the property. So I'm saying whatever investment, because I'm making the point that you could invest in something that doesn't actually have value. It's not a bad investment, right? You can buy something, you can spend $1 million for it, and then you try and sell it, and someone only wants to pay $50 for it. So what I'm saying is that whatever interest any investor has from a property interest perspective, based on the Land Acquisition Act, they would be entitled to be compensated.
Okay, so I'm asking about the citizenship, the implications for the citizenship that they got as a result of it.
Because I'm saying that the citizenship, although it's called citizenship by investment, I'm saying once you made the investment, whether the investment is successful or not, has nothing to do with that person's right to retain the citizenship. Because the government, the way it works is that they've acquired the citizenship, they're citizens of Grenada. And if the investment they made turns out to be an investment that doesn't ring true or is not successful, that's just a loss that they take. There is no guarantee, no underwriting any of the investments that individual investors make in the CBI program. We also have to recall there are two components to CBI. There's the property development ones where people may invest in a particular property. And there's the National Transformation Fund CBI program where someone simply pays the government $200,000 and acquires citizenship. They're not making any investment there in the sense of seeking to get a return from some particular property that they invested in. But arguably, you can see they're investing in Grenada because by giving $200,000 and acquiring citizenship, those funds are used for budgetary support, the funds are used for repayment of loans, the funds are used for government projects, as the case might be.
But that is separate. That's different from those who go under the investment component of the program.
It's separate from those who go under the investment.
You have the citizenship by investment and the national transformation donation aspect of it. And you said, Prime Minister, that you're still in negotiations with the developers. But do we have any indication yet as to how much all of this is likely to cost us? Are we crunching numbers and figuring out, because we must have figured out what.
I've indicated that we acquired the site for $22 million.
Oh, you have said so?
Yes, I said so right at the commencement of $22 million.
Oh, I missed that.
$2 million US, and he also indicated that once that deal is finalized, I think we were talking close to October 15th, we will make that announcement in a further press briefing.
No, that's not separate. So I'm saying, so let me be clear in the event it wasn't heard. The site has been acquired. It has been acquired at $22 million US. Right? And the government has made an initial payment towards that 22, and we anticipate concluding the payments by January or February of next year. Right? The developers I was talking about is someone to take over the site. As in, we are in ongoing discussions with developers, new developers, to take over the site so that we can, in fact, put the site in the hands of someone who will develop it, complete the construction, and get to a point where in the next 2 years or so, we have a hotel that is open and functioning.
And will it be a PPP, or are we giving them a leasehold?
Well, as I indicated, the intention will be to offer the property as a leasehold so that the developer could, in fact, be in a position to raise the finance and complete the project.
And do we have, can you tell the country a bit more on who are these potential investors that we are
At this
targeting?
point, I know, I prefer not to, I want to get to a point. There's no point in giving the public speculative information in the sense that the only developer that would matter is the developer that really we have a deal with.
Any Grenadians in the diaspora getting an opportunity to do this, or any Grenadians?
Any Grenadian who is interested in the property is in a position to obviously come to the government, and we are happy to discuss with them.
All right, thank you so much for the clarification. I'd like to ask if there's anyone else online who may want to pose a question like this to them. If not, we're going to give clarity to Ms. Beverly from GBN. So while my technical team gets that information for us, we're going to take a question, final question from GBN on the floor here. Go ahead.
Okay, so my question is on the issue of national security.
Sure.
There may be CARICOM nationals residing in Grenada who entered illegally. Some may or may not be involved in criminal activities. Are there any plans or special operations to find such people and have them returned